Good evening. It is time for today's Tax Talk. I'm your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. It is Tuesday, March 29th, the year of our Lord 2022. Happy birthday, Julie. And I always talk, this is Crypto Tuesday. We always talk about crypto. And I always talk, I'm a big booster of blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs, all of that. We talk a lot about it. But today we might take a different tact on it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Won't you join us? Okay, so again, we're big advocates of this blockchain. I think it could change the world. I've told you that I'm hesitant because of the promise of the internet has not really come to pass, in my opinion, and maybe the promise of blockchain will not come to pass. This week I had found a couple of articles that are really taking the opposite approach, that blockchain is not really the answer or the future. And so I thought I would look at both sides and at least consider it. Consider it is what we can do. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to consider it. So here's a couple good articles. Go on here. Fed governor says blockchain is totally overrated, claims crypto is just electronic gold. Now, we talked a lot about whether it's a storage, whether crypto its purpose is really a storage of value or a medium of exchange. So this Fed governor is taking that it's just a storage of value, and we need something more than that. The American economist and member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors believes the blockchain technology is totally overrated, even though the U.S. Central Bank put a lot of resources into understanding digital currencies and the blockchain. He said on a panel that discussed the central bank digital currencies. That's why I had that up, the central bank, because this is from the central bank digital currency. It's a stable coin. And this is what the United States government is talking about replacing the dollar with, a digital coin. This was the purpose of the executive order that we talked about on this show from the Biden administration, and his executive order about directing all the agencies in the government to consider cryptocurrency and blockchain. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Fed governor insists these things aren't payment instruments at all. On Friday, a virtual panel, I don't know if we can even see that on here. On Friday, a virtual panel made up of Yale's Bank of International Settlements executive and the Fed's Christopher Waller discussed blockchain technology and CBDCs at great length. That's the digital currency. The hour-long panel discussion was called "Should Central Bank Issue Digital Currencies?" And Waller is very skeptical about such technologies. These things aren't payment instruments at all, he remarked during a virtual panel. My view is that these things are just electronic gold. They're forms of storage carrying wealth across time. Look at art. Look at baseball cards. Look at all this stuff that's intrinsically useless that people pay a lot of money and hold on to because they think that they can sell it later and get their money back. I don't know if that's why people buy baseball cards. Now, some do look at it as an investment, but they're only valuable not because somebody might buy it from you later, but because people find value in these memorabilia. So I think he's kind of off base there. Same thing with art. Art is in the eyes. Waller commented on a fiat-pegged digital currencies during a virtual conference with members of the Cleveland Fed, and he discussed applying regulations to the stablecoin economy. Prior to the Cleveland Fed virtual conference statements, Waller told participants at the Official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum discussion in October that he was skeptical about the Fed using CBDCs or digital dollars. Well, we know that that's where it's going to go. During Friday's virtual discussion on central banking and digital currencies, he reiterated his skepticism over whether or not the Fed really needs to issue a CBDC. So far, he was not convinced that there's a need for a central bank digital currency in the United States. I'm trying to focus on why do we really need it as opposed to a look at all the bells and whistles that come along with it. I haven't been convinced about it yet. It's not saying that I can't be, but I haven't seen that on a retail CBDC. In addition to discussing the U.S., he also talked about China's CBDC, and he stressed that he doesn't believe the digital yuan threatens the U.S. dollar. What has the Central Bank of China done? He opined on Friday. They've allowed China households to have a bank account with this BPOC, I don't know what that is, so that they can pay their electric bill, I see. I don't see how having payment accounts at central bank threatens the dollar in any way, shape, or form. Well, I hope he's right. So anyway, I hope he's right. Let's see if this is additional. What do you think about the Federal Reserve Board of Governors official Christopher Waller and his opinion about blockchain technology being overrated? Let us know. Okay, so I told you what I think. I think he's overrated. I just don't think he gets it. Now, I might be wrong. He knows more about central banking than I do. But I can look at, we didn't always have a dollar either. There wasn't always a central currency. And now that there is, that's going to. So here's another example of someone coming down on blockchain. And the future of digital cash is not on the blockchain. So here's another story about that. And I thought, again, while we're at trashing, or at least being skeptical of blockchain and the digital currency, let's go down that road. When you hear the phrase digital cash, what comes to mind? Perhaps a payment app like Vimeo that you used in situations that used to call for paper bills, like paying back a friend for dinner. Or maybe you think of cryptocurrencies. After all, the original Bitcoin white paper is titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Did you know that? I knew it because I read this article. But none of these digital payment options are really like cash. Unlike paper money, they require both an internet connection and a bank account to use. After all, they lack what has long made cash the preferred medium of civil libertarians, dissidents, and criminals alike. Privacy. The only kind of money that leaves no paper trail is paper. Well, that's interesting. A bill introduced in Congress on Monday seeks to recreate the virtues of cash, privacy, and all in digital form. The eCash Act would direct the U.S. government to experiment with issuing digital dollars that are stored on hardware, not in bank accounts, and can be used without an internet connection. The idea of new surveillance-proof currency will surely face skepticism within government. But with paper money on the slow path to extinction, the case for the real digital alternative will only grow stronger. So again, this article makes you think. It's true. Well, he's going to talk about crypto, so let's go on. It's easy enough to understand why apps like Venmo, which infamously makes your transactions public by default, are an imperfect substitute for cash. Anyone using an app to send money around should be aware that they're leaving a permanent digital trail that could be accessed by the government or malicious actors. With crypto, on the other hand, the lack of privacy is a bit of counterintuitive. Privacy was an essential part of Bitcoin's original appeal. Yes, it was. That's what everybody touted. Early crypto enthusiasts believed that the blockchain would free them of Big Brother. Using a distributed ledger rather than a centralized one would remove the need for a bank-like middleman that could block transactions. And tying accounts to cryptographic wallet addresses rather than offline identity would keep transactions anonymous. This led to the profusion of illegal activity taking advantage of cryptocurrencies. Well, don't they take advantage of cash too? But that's why I never understood that argument that criminals use cryptocurrency, so we got to stop cryptocurrency. Criminals use cash too. Should we stop cash? But as my colleague illustrates in his forthcoming book, The early faith in crypto anonymity was misplaced. The thing about blockchains is that while your transactions might be hidden behind a crypto wallet address, they are also permanently stored on public database. It didn't take law enforcement agencies too long to figure out how to connect those transactions and wallets to real-world identities behind them. In the grand scheme of things, distributed ledger versus regular ledger is almost irrelevant on the question of cash-like privacy, says the law professor. The more meaningful distinction, he explains, is between two different currency models, tokens and accounts. When you pay for something with cash, you're handing over a physical token. Whoever holds the token has the money, and there is no third party to the transaction. When you send a payment through using Venmo or a bank, on the other hand, you're just directing them to update your account by moving some numbers around in their books. The same thing is true of cryptocurrencies. The only meaningful difference is that the network as a whole, rather than a financial institution, approves of the transaction. This means that despite the various options for you making online payments, true digital cash doesn't exist. This is not merely a theoretical distinction. Paper cash has been on the decline for years, a trend accelerated during the pandemic, as more and more businesses decided to stop accepting paper money. This poses risks, most notably for the so-called unbanked, people who can't afford to have a bank account and thus can't access non-bank forms of payment. Governments around the world, spooked by the rise of privately issued cryptocurrencies, have been exploring so-called central bank digital currencies. Imagine a government version of PayPal or Venmo. This could solve the unbanked problem by creating a public banking option for low-income people, but it would not replace cash. As the economy shifts inexorably toward all digital transactions, a future where our only options are payment apps, banks, crypto, or CBDCs means a future in which every financial transaction is potentially subject to surveillance by the government or private companies. Absolutely, we've seen what's going to happen. We saw what happened with Russia. We saw what happened to the truckers in Canada and how they can just debank you. What happened to Mike Lindell here in the States. It's kind of scary. It gives them a lot of power. They can turn on and off your bank account just by the touch of a button. And if all my money's in there, and like my credit cards, if all I have are cards and they can turn them on and off whenever they want, where is the where does that lead us? The eCash Act, introduced by Representative Lynch of Massachusetts and chair of the House Task Force on Financial Technology, seeks to avoid that fate. It stands for the Electronic Currency and Secure Hardware Act, an impeccable legislative acronym. The bill, which Gray consulted on, would direct the U.S. Treasury Department to conduct a pilot program for a version of digital dollars that work just like cash. I don't think that's where the government's going to go. They don't want anonymity. They want to be able to control it. And that's the whole purpose of them moving to this, in my opinion. They're not looking for an alternative to that you can keep away from them. They want everybody online where they can control you, in my opinion. If we're to have public opinion for option for digital finance, it needs to include everyone. A key part of that is being able to go offline. What would that look like? The Treasury would issue digital dollars just as they issued paper money since the 1860s to function as cash. The money can't live on the government's books or in a distributed blockchain ledger. That means balances must be stored on hardware. That could look like a standalone device, or it could be a secure hardware environment on your cell phone, similar to a SIM card, especially a chip that is physically segregated from the rest of the device so that it doesn't depend on the security of the entire operating system. This idea has been around for a while. In the 1990s, companies like Mondex developed stored value cards that could support offline payments. Governments, however, didn't like the idea of issuing digital currency, and those companies were bought up by the credit card industry. A Wired Stephen Levy wrote, in 1994. When I called the spokesman for the Federal Reserve to ask about electronic cash, he laughed at me. It was as if I was inquiring about exchange rates with UFOs. Today, the technology is sleeker and its applications more apparent. Like last week, I spoke with the chief technical officer of Whisper Cash over Zoom. He showed me his company's products. One looks like a credit card that has both a touchscreen keypad and a miniature Kindle-like electronic ink display. Payments can be sent between cards either using Bluetooth or by entering the recipient's ID number and the amount. In the latter case, the transaction generates a 10-digit cryptographic hash that encodes the parties to the transaction and the amount. To receive it, the recipient has to enter the code into their own card. Whisper Cash's other main product, a secure chip that sticks into a SIM card, turns a phone, even a cheap feature phone of the type common throughout the developing world, into a wallet of digital cash. The key to making this work on a technical level is security, not so much from outside attackers, but from the person holding the money. The main danger for any digital currency is that so-called double spend problem, where someone spends the same money over and over again, wrecking the system. Anyone holding a digital cash device has the powerful incentive to try to hack past its defenses against double spending. The device is the user's enemy. The user will try to double spend, will try to counterfeit money, will generally try to bypass any limitations. He acknowledges that Whisper Cash, like every piece of hardware ever built, can't offer perfect security. The realistic goal is to make it so expensive and time-consuming to hack the chip that no one would bother. Any version of state-backed money will involve restrictions on how much can be stored on a device and how much can be moved in a transaction, similar to the way to which American banks are required to report cash withdrawals of deposits above $10,000. Even if a hacker managed to unlock a digital cash wallet for double spending, it would be hard to actually spend the money because everyone else's device would still be capped. At this point, the barriers to digital cash are political, not technological. Government officials tend to like being able to monitor who spends what. That's what I say. In the U.S., lawmakers remain freaked out about criminals taking advantage of crypto. Again, they take advantage of cash too. Despite law enforcement growing success in catching them in the environment of digital currency, that's even more resistant to surveillance will be a tough sell. The eCash Act tries to anticipate these concerns. It specializes in digital cash must be subject to the existing anti-money laundering, counterterrorism, know your customer, and financial transaction reporting requirements and regulations. Privacy is not the only selling point for hardware-based digital cash. Because it doesn't have to be connected to the network, it could work even in places with no internet access or in an event of a national disaster, a prospect that grows even likelier thanks to climate change. Why do they have to put that in there? For that reason, the near-term future of the technology is most likely as an off-ramp, offline backup option for central bank-issued digital currency. So far, the Whisper Cash's market, I think the first wave of customers will be countries where there's concern about natural disaster risk, or there's large parts of the country that are not online. In that situation, people would need to be able to make transactions with no internet access. But these transactions that's not sick, that's not me, to be periodically updated to the central bank. The question of whether a public deserves true digital cash is ultimately philosophical. It depends on whether you believe the people should have the right to a degree of privacy in their personal finances. Here, I believe that. And that as life shifts ever more online and our purchases generate detailed data that merchants and marketers eagerly sweep up, the government should take the initiative to carve out a zone of confidentiality that even it can't pierce. I don't think that's going to happen. The supporters of the eCash Act want to force Congress to take a stand on the issue, protecting the liberties that we have always enjoyed with physical cash in a digital form is going to be essential to preserve the liberties that we already have. If people want to get rid of privacy, they should probably own. They should probably own that. Agreed. Again, I think that is the big question. Blockchain offers transparency and privacy. Very difficult to have both. And again, now that the government is down on these registers, there are no anonymous wallets anymore. All things are transactable. The know your customer rules, which mean you can't open an account without proof of who you are. And so you can't open fictitious wallets any longer. At one time you could. You cannot any longer. At least you're not supposed to be able to. And if you've ever tried to open up a cryptocurrency account, you know what I'm talking about. It's not that easy to do because of the know your customer rules. And so anyway, it's a different way to looking at things. I'm still an advocate for blockchain. I have hopes that it can provide things that it's promised, but I have doubts also, and that's why I wanted to read this today for the doubters, because there are a lot of doubters out there. And some of that really actually makes sense, doesn't it? About whether they can or can't, get what they're asking for. I don't think the federal government will ever produce something that they can't control. Not anymore. I don't think that they will. So anyway, that's my opinion. So now remember, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe, share our content, get it out there. We share tax news. Remember, tax news is the core of all news. And I ask you to get it to your friends and family. Get our content out. We think it's important that they learn about what we talk about every day. And remember that if you have an IRS problem, if you owe the IRS money, or if you have unfiled tax returns, what's the first thing you should do? Get a copy of my book, Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. Go to freeirsbook.com, freeirsbook.com. That's freeirsbook.com. Get your free copy of Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. So thanks so much for joining us today on the show. We appreciate it. Tomorrow we're back to talk about taxes. Now remember, on Thursday we won't be here. I'll be at the Bill O'Reilly event in Waukegan for WLS AM 890, and we'll be out there talking to folks and meeting folks. So I encourage you to get out there and see us. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you soon.